The unrequited geometry of you. The first time I saw Benji Sharpe, he was trying to fold a map of the universe into a paper airplane. It was third period astronomy, and a shaft of autumn sun lit the dust motes dancing around his furious, fumbling hands. He wasn't trying to be profound. He was, as I would soon learn, simply trying to see if it would fly. My love for Benji wasn't a lightning strike. It was a slow geological shift. The kind that recontinents a soul without a single earthquake to show for it. Began with the maps. Benji saw the world not as a collection of places, but as a series of vectors and trajectories. He drew lines from his doorstep to the Andromeda galaxy on his bedroom ceiling. He calculated the precise angle of a basketball arc not to make the shot, but for the elegant parabola it described against the sky. I was Alara, the quiet girl in the library chorale who organized her highlighters in chromatic order and found solace in the silent, predictable logic of mathematics. Where he saw cosmic trajectories, I saw beautiful, unsolvable equations. We were two different languages describing the same universal constants. Our friendship was an accident of proximity, a shared, rain-soaked bus stop. He talked a torrent of ideas about the heat death of the universe and the aerodynamics of bumblebees. I listened, a sheltered harbor for his glorious, chaotic storms. I learned the specific gravity of his sighs, the frequency of his laughter, the way he chewed his pencil when wrestling with a problem he couldn't solve. He never saw me as a problem to be solved. He told me about his crushes. There was Chloe from the swim team, whose kick generated what he estimated was a perfect 4.2 newtons of force. He asked me to help him write a text to Maya in art class, because my words were less likely to combust upon delivery. I did it. I folded my own heart into a tiny invisible square and used its sharp edges to craft the perfect witty message for him to send to another girl. My love became a secret workshop where I built his happiness with tools that cut my own hands. I documented it all. Not in a diary, but in a series of theorems, written in a black moleskine with a fine-tip pen. Theorem 4.1. The probability of reciprocal affection. Given. His smile is 1.7 times brighter when discussing her. Given. He adjusts his posture by 12 degrees in her presence. Asterisk proof. The likelihood is asymptotic to 0. It will approach but never touch. Asterisk. I thought if I could just graph the chaos, find the underlying algorithm, I could solve the pain out of it. I could rationalize the irrational. The pinnacle of my foolish hope arrived on a Tuesday. Benji burst into the library. His eyes wide with a discovery. "Ilara," he breathed, sliding into the chair opposite me. "I've figured it out." My heart performed a function it was not designed for, a vertical asymptote shooting towards infinity. Asterisk he knows. He's calculated the way I look at him. He's solved for X and found me, asterisk. He spread a sheet of graph paper on the table. On it, he'd plotted a series of points. "It's Sarah," he said, pointing to the center of the scatter plot. "See. All my routes through the school, my random trips to the water fountain, my path through the park. They all curve toward her locus. It's not random. It's orbital." I looked at the paper. The points were a perfect, gentle ellipse around a central star labeled W. Sarah Welch. Course. The new girl who played the cello. The proof was right there in clean black ink. A perfect geometric expression of his desire. It was the most beautiful and devastating thing I had ever seen. "It's elegant, right?" he said, his voice full of wonder. "It's a perfect ellipse," I whispered, my voice dust. Kepler's first law. A planet moves around the sun in an elliptical orbit, with the sun at one focus. His face lit up. "Yes, exactly. You get it. You always get it." He gathered his proof of love for another woman and left, already calculating his next move. I sat in the silent library, the air gone thick and cold. My own theorem was proven. I was not the sun. I was not even a planet in his system. I was the empty space between constellations, the dark matter that held everything together but was itself invisible, unfelt, unknown. That night I didn't cry. I opened my notebook to a fresh page. The page was a stark, white plain, a country without geography. At the top I wrote, "Final theorem. The unrequited geometry of you and me. Asterisk given, I am a point. Fixed. Constant. Asterisk. Asterisk given. You are a vector. Magnitude. Infinite. Direction. Away. Asterisk. Asterisk proof. K. It is what it was proven to be. Asterisk." Closed the book. The quid asterisk quod erat demonstrandum asterisk, that which was to be demonstrated, had never felt so final, so cold. The love didn't vanish. Equations this fundamental don't just disappear. They become part of the universe's base code. But I stopped trying to solve it. I stopped translating my heartbeat into his language of trajectories and forces. The next time it rained, we stood at the same bus stop. He talked about Sarah, about the precise harmonic resonance of her cello notes. I listened, and for the first time, the sound of his voice didn't rewrite my own internal laws. It was just sound. Veda. A beautiful, lonely star burning in a distant galaxy of its own. He finished his story and looked at me, expecting the usual nod of understanding. The bus arrived, its doors hissing open. "You know, Ilara," he said, stepping onto the bottom step. "You're my best friend. I don't know what I'd do without you." It was the climax of every unrequited love story. The moment the hero confesses how vital the sidekick is. The words that should have been a bomb were simply a statement of fact. He was a planet, tracing his beautiful, inevitable orbit. And I was the silent, steady moon he'd chosen to circle him, forever locked in his gravity, forever seeing only one side of him, my own dark side forever hidden. I gave him a small, final smile. It was not a theorem. It was not a proof. It was just a smile. "I know, Benji," I said. "See you tomorrow." The doors closed between us, and as the bus pulled away into the gleaming, wet street, I understood. Some loves are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be observed, noted, and folded into the map of who you become. A silent, private coordinate in the vast and lonely geometry of growing up. The silence after the bus left was a physical thing. It pressed in on my ears, a vacuum after the constant low hum of Benji's presence. The rain had softened to a fine mist, beating on my jacket like 1,000 tiny lenses. Each one felt like it was focusing the world into a sharper, colder clarity. I walked home. Not the route I usually took with him, which was a meandering path past the park where he'd tried to skip stones across the puddles, calculating the optimal angle of incidence. I took the direct route. The hypotenuse. The shortest distance between 2 points. It was brutally efficient. My house was quiet. Up in my room, the black moleskine lay on my desk like a closed tomb. I didn't open it. Instead, I opened my calculus textbook. The problems there were solvable. They had answers in the back of the book. You could check your work. There was a comfort in that, a sterile, predictable comfort. The days that followed were an exercise in recalibration. I was a satellite that had broken free of a gravitational pull I'd once thought was central to my existence. The world wobbled on its axis for a bit, then righted itself. Benji, of course, was oblivious. His orbit had merely adjusted, its new focus firmly fixed on Sarah Welch. He still found me at the bus stop in the library, his mind buzzing with new data. "Her favorite composer is Shostakovich," he announced one morning, his breath fogging in the chilly air. "Statistically unusual for a cellist her age. Most prefer the Romantic period. It suggests a more complex, dissonant internal world. Isn't that fascinating?" "It's a data point," I said, sipping my tea. The warmth was a fact. The flavor bergamot was a fact. His commentary was just noise. He blinked, thrown by the lack of my usual engaged echo. "Well, yeah. A significant one. Correlation isn't causation, Benji," I said, a line I'd heard him use 100 times. "Maybe she just likes the way it sounds." He stared at me as if I'd just proposed the earth was flat. "But the why is the important part. The underlying reason. Sometimes the thing itself is enough, I said softly, more to myself than to him. The shift was subtle, but it was there. Our conversations, which had once felt like a thrilling private dialect, now felt like a monologue with occasional, dutiful feedback from me. I was learning to speak a new language. The language of detachment. I started staying late in the computer lab, working on an independent study project about fractal patterns in nature. I found a strange peace in the endless, repeating complexity of fern fronds and snowflakes. They were patterns that never truly repeated, algorithms that created infinite beauty without any desire to be observed. One afternoon he found me there, the glow of the monitor reflecting in my glasses. "There you are," he said, slumping into the chair next to me. He looked tired. His hair was a mess, and there was a smudge of graphite on his cheek. He'd been drawing again. "I've been looking everywhere. I need your help." My fingers paused over the keyboard. The old instinct to be needed flared for a microsecond before guttering out. "What is it?" He pushed a folded piece of paper toward me. It was a concert program. Sarah's winter recital was circled. "I'm going. But what does it mean? What is the appropriate response? Do I bring flowers? So, what genus? Roses are cliché, lilies are funereal. Is a single stem too sparse? A bouquet too grandiose? What is the vector of the gesture?" I looked from the frantic scrawl of notes in the margins of the program to his desperate, hopeful face. He was trying to solve for romance, to derive the equation for love. He had all the data points but was missing the fundamental variable. The heart. A month ago, this would have been an exquisite torture. I would have poured every ounce of my secret love into helping him win hers, a ghostwriter of his affection. Now it just felt tedious. "Benji," I said, my voice even. "You can't calculate this. You just have to feel it." He stared at me, utterly lost. "Feelings are just electrochemical signals. Messy, imprecise data. I need a strategy." I closed my fractal program. The screen went dark. "Then get her yellow tulips," I said, turning to face him fully. "They're bright. They're friendly. They don't carry the weight of centuries of poetic subtext. They're just happy. And if she asks why, tell her you thought they looked like bottled sunlight. Don't tell her you ran a comparative analysis of floral symbolism across 6 cultures." He was silent for a long moment, absorbing this. I saw the calculations going on behind his eyes, the variables of yellow, tulip, and bottled sunlight being plugged into his internal model. For the first time it looked like hard work. "Bottled sunlight," he repeated slowly, tasting the words. They weren't a scientific term. They were poetry. Okay, I can do that." He stood up, clutching the program like a lifeline. He took a step toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Ilara. Yes. You're different lately. Is everything? Are your algorithms functioning within normal parameters?" A smile touched my lips, a real one, faint and bittersweet. He couldn't just ask if I was okay. He had to phrase it as a systems check. "All parameters are normal, Benji," I said. "I'm just working on a new problem set. It's more complex than I'm used to." He nodded, satisfied. That was a language he understood. "Right. Well, don't forget to factor in downtime. Processing power diminishes with fatigue." And then he was gone, off to solve the problem of Sarah Welch. I turned back to my dark screen, my own reflection a ghost in the glass. The new problem set was me. The complex, unsolvable, beautifully dissonant equation of who I was without him at the center. And for the first time I was no longer afraid of never finding the solution. I was starting to appreciate the complexity of the work. The fractal project became my new universe. It was a world of infinite regression, where every edge revealed a deeper, more intricate pattern. It was a comfort. In a strange way, it mirrored my own condition. I was pulling back, zooming out from the singular blinding point of Benji, and seeing the vast and complicated shape of my own life. I started eating lunch in the art studio sometimes instead of the library. The smell of turpentine and clay was a welcome change from old paper and silence. I didn't paint or draw. I just sat with my sandwich, watching hands shape nothing into something. It was messy, logical, the opposite of calculus. I liked it. Ms. Gable, the art teacher, a woman with ink-stained fingers and a perpetually surprised expression, finally wandered over to me one day. "You're the numbers whiz," she said, not unkindly. "Benji Sharpe's shadow." The label should have stung. Didn't. It was just an old, outdated data point. "Not so much anymore," I said. She hummed, looking at the fractal printouts I was annotating. "Mandelbrot. The infinite coastline. For all its precision, it's a shape that can never be measured. It's a paradox. The more you zoom in, the longer the perimeter gets. Infinity contained within a finite space." She tapped a finger on a particularly spiraling edge. "Feels like being 17, doesn't it?" I looked up at her, truly seeing her for the first time. She wasn't just the art teacher. She was an observer of paradoxes. It was in the art studio that I met Leo. He was a transfer student, all sharp elbows and quiet concentration, usually covered in a fine layer of gray clay. He was building a sculpture of a hand, but it was all wrong. The proportions were exaggerated, the fingers too long and twisting, grasping at air. It was unsettling. It was brilliant. He never tried to make small talk. We existed in a parallel silence. He with his monstrous, beautiful hand. Me with my infinitely complex coastlines. One afternoon, my pencil rolled off the table. He caught it before it hit the floor and handed it back without a word. Our fingers brushed. His were rough with dried clay. "Thanks," I said. He just nodded, his gaze already back on the impossible anatomy of his sculpture. "Your math is noisy," he said after a moment, his voice low and gravelly. Blink. "Noisy. All those numbers. They're shouting. This," he said, gesturing with a clay cake tool at his hand, "is quiet." I looked from my precise, printed graphs to his chaotic, silent creation. He was right. Benji's courtship of Sarah Welch progressed along its predicted trajectory. The yellow tulips had been a success. He reported this to me with the fervor of a scientist who had just confirmed a hypothesis, yet still couldn't explain the underlying principle. "She smiled," he said, his eyes wide with the mystery of it. A 4.3-second smile. Full dentition showing. But the data is inconclusive. Was it the tulips? The specific shade of yellow? The bottled sunlight metaphor? I need to isolate the variable. Or, I said, focusing on tying my shoe, you could just accept that she liked it and be happy. He fell silent. I'd started giving him answers that didn't fit his formulas, and it was causing a system error. I was no longer a reliable instrument. The winter formal came around. Benji, of course, had asked Sarah. He'd done it with a complex origami of the concert program, a fact he relayed to me with pride. I half expected him to ask me to calculate the optimal dance moves for maximum romantic probability. He didn't. Instead, he found me the week before, at my new usual table in the corner of the cafeteria. He looked uncharacteristically nervous, his usual confident energy replaced by a jittery uncertainty. "I need a suit," he blurted out. "My dad's old one doesn't. The vectors are all wrong. The shoulders are non-Euclidean." I almost smiled. "You need a tailor, Benji, not a mathematician." "Will you come?" he asked, and for a fleeting second, it was the old Benji, the one who needed his harbor. "To the mall. You have an eye for patterns. For geometry." It was the first time he'd ever acknowledged I might have a skill he didn't. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a statement of fact. And it was enough. So I went. I guided him through the bewildering wilderness of men's formal wear. I held fabric swatches up to his face, noting the way navy blue made the flecks in his eyes look like distant galaxies. I explained the Pythagorean theorem of a proper jacket fit. He took notes on his phone. He found a suit. It was perfect. Standing in the three-way mirror, He looked less like a boy and more like a concept of a man. He turned, examining the lines. "It's efficient," he declared, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the highest praise he could give. On his way out of the dressing room, a garment bag slung over his shoulder, he stopped. "You're not going to the formal?" The question was so casual, so offhand, it was like being asked about the weather. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not." He nodded, already moving on. "Your loss. The statistical probability of social awkwardness is high, but the potential for new data is significant." That night I worked on my fractal project. I zoomed in and in on the screen, the pattern unfolding forever. It was a quiet infinity. I thought of Leo's comment. Noisy math. I opened a new program, a simple drawing application. I started with a point, then a line, then a curve. I wasn't trying to solve for anything. I wasn't trying to prove a theorem. I was just making a mark. It was messy. It was imprecise. It was quiet. It was the first drawing I'd made since I was a child. It wasn't good, but it was mine. And it didn't have a single thing to do with Benji Sharpe. The feeling was unfamiliar, a new variable in the equation of myself. It was, I realized, the beginning of a solution I hadn't even known I was looking for. The night of the winter formal, a deep, unnatural quiet settled over my neighborhood. I was curled on the living room sofa, a textbook open but unread on my knees, a mug of tea cooling on the side table. My parents were reading. The only sound was the gentle rustle of a page turning and the hum of the refrigerator. My phone, face down on the cushion beside me, buzzed. A single violent shudder. He knew. With a certainty that felt like a law of physics, I knew it was him. My heart, that traitorous organ I was still trying to retrain, performed a clumsy, familiar somersault. I let it buzz again, and again. Fourth time. A desperate, arrhythmic pattern. My mother looked up from her book. "Aren't you going to get that, Ilara?" Picked it up. The screen glowed with his name. Not a text. Oh. Benji never called. Text was a controlled, data-based medium. Call was chaos. I swiped to answer, bringing the phone to my ear. "Benji." A rush of static, the distant thump of bass, and his voice, strained and too loud. "Ilara. Can you, the calculations were wrong. Where are you? Are you okay? The data was flawed. The suit. It's a correct fit. The fabric composition is 82% wool, 18% nylon. Optimal for temperature regulation and drape. The tulips were the correct choice." Her feedback was positive. But the system is failing. I could picture him, hiding in some sterile tiled hallway outside a ballroom, one hand pressed to his free ear. His brow furrowed in profound confusion. "What system, Benji?" "Asterisk, the interaction system." "Asterisk," he nearly shouted, and I heard the panic, raw and undisguised by equations. "The conversation. It's a nonlinear dynamic system. Chaotic. Can't model it." I prepared talking points. Topics of mutual interest. Shostakovich's use of dissonance, the aerodynamic efficiency of bumblebees, the thermodynamic inevitability of the universe's heat death. She said it was a bummer. "Bummer, Ilara. How do you factor for bummer?" Closed my eyes. A part of me, the old, devoted cartographer of his soul, wanted to laugh. Or cry. The grand romance, reduced to a catastrophic systems failure. "You don't factor for it, Benji," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "You change the subject. You ask her about her music. You listen. But my prepared statements, throw them away. Just be there. With her." There was a long silence on his end, filled with the ghost of a pop song and his ragged breathing. "It's too loud in here," he said, his voice small now. "The decibel level is causing cognitive interference. And the lighting is all wrong. It's creating unflattering shadows. It's inefficient." He wasn't talking about the dance anymore. He was describing the terrifying, messy interior of his own head. He was lost in the one universe he couldn't map. Human connection. "Then go outside," I said. "Ask her to get some air." The temperature is 42 degrees Fahrenheit. The probability of discomfort is. Benji. I cut him off, a firmness in my tone that was new, even to me. Just go. Take her hand and go outside. Beat of silence. Take her hand. What is the grip strength required to convey intent but not cause capillary compression? I sighed, a long, slow exhalation. The tea on the table was cold. The fractal patterns of condensation on the mug were more predictable than this conversation. Just be gentle, I whispered. I heard a muffled voice in the background, a girl's voice, sweet and questioning. Benji. Everything okay? I have to go, he said abruptly, the panic returning. The variable is active. Thank you. Your input is. It's a key parameter. The line went dead. I held the phone to my ear for a moment longer, listening to the empty hum. I had just given him the best advice I could. I had handed him the tools to succeed with the girl he loved. And the strange thing was, it didn't tear me apart. Just felt sad. Like watching a brilliant star collapse in on itself, unable to share its own light. I placed the phone back on the cushion. The quiet of the living room felt deeper, more profound. The chapter wasn't closed. How could it be? He was still Benji. I was still me. But the story had changed. I was no longer a character waiting in the wings of his. I was in a different book altogether, one I was only just learning how to read. And the next page for the first time was blank, and it was mine. The Monday after the formal, the high school halls felt different. The air was thick with the whispered aftermath of a shared event, a collective memory I hadn't been a part of. I felt like an anthropologist observing a strange tribe, noting the subtle changes in grouping, the new alliances formed under the strobe lights, the quiet fractures that happen in the dark. Benji found me at my locker. He looked exhausted, the perfect lines of his suit replaced by a rumpled hoodie, but there was a new, frantic energy in his eyes. The energy of unsolved data. It worked, he said without preamble. The getting air parameter. Ambient temperature was suboptimal, but proximity and reduced audio stimuli increased conversational coherence by an estimated 60%. That's great, Benji, I said, sliding my calculus book into my bag. My tone was flat, a practiced neutrality. But it introduced a new variable, he continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. A significant one. Tactile interaction. I froze, my hand on the lock. Hand-holding, he stated, as if announcing a newfound celestial body. The initial grip was, as you advised, gentle. But then what? Duration. Interdigit pressure variance. Moisture transfer. It's a feedback loop of immense complexity. I need to model it. He pulled out his phone, pulling up a notes app filled with frantic, bullet-pointed observations. He was going to show me. He was going to show me the raw data of his hand holding Sarah Welch's. A cold, clean anger, sharp and precise as a theorem, washed through me. It was not the hot, jealous rage of before. This was different. This was the absolute refusal to be his archive for this particular dataset. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it hit the space between us like a stone dropped in a still pond. He blinked, his thumb hovering over the screen. What? I said no. I closed my locker door with a firm, metallic click. The sound was final. I'm not going to help you analyze holding her hand, Benji. His face contorted in genuine, beautiful confusion. This was a calculation he had not run. But you have the framework. You understand the need for empirical observation. The hand is a complex structure of 27 bones, 28 muscles, 34 joints. The potential for data. I don't care, I interrupted, my voice low but clear. A group of freshmen passing by glanced at us, sensing a shift in the social weather. I don't care about the synovial fluid or the flexor tendons. That's your thing. Not me. Not anymore. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. I was a constant in his life that had just declared itself a variable. I was a proven axiom that had just been disproven. But, "You're my best friend," he said, and it sounded less like a declaration of affection and more like a statement of a broken fact. "Who else would I?" "Figure it out yourself," I said, shouldering my bag. The weight of it was familiar, but I felt lighter. "Or ask Sarah. It's her hand. I'm sure she has opinions on the matter." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I knew what his face would look like. The crumpled, lost expression of a genius confronted with a problem that defied all logic. A problem named Ilara, who had just revoked her permission to be studied. The rest of the day passed in a strange, clear bubble. I heard the whispers, of course. The story was too good not to spread. Benji Sharpe and Sarah Welch held hands outside the formal for 27 minutes. Ilara Moss, his weird shadow, finally snapped. "We're not friends anymore." They were wrong. We were still something. The bond of 4 years doesn't vanish in a hallway confrontation. But it had been fundamentally altered. Its chemical composition changed forever. He didn't approach me again. I saw him at a distance, sometimes with Sarah, sometimes alone, staring into the middle distance as if trying to solve the most difficult equation of his life. I went to the art studio after school. Leo was there, attacking a new block of clay with a wire tool. He didn't look up as I entered, but his shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. I didn't go to my usual table. I walked over to a bag of wet clay, plunged my hands in, and pulled out a cold gray lump. I slammed it onto a wooden board. It made a satisfying thud. I didn't try to make anything. I just started working the clay, kneading the stiffness out of it, feeling the cool, gritty slip coat my skin. It was messy. It was physical. It was the absolute opposite of a clean mathematical proof. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leo pause. He watched my hands for a moment, a critic observing a novice. "Too much wrist," he grunted, not unkindly. I adjusted. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the sound of creation and destruction, of things being shaped without a blueprint. It was the noise of moving on, and for the first time it wasn't a quiet, lonely sound. It was the sound of my own 2 hands making something new. The silence between Benji and me became a physical entity in the school. It had mass and occupied space. People instinctively parted around it in the hallways, giving our non-interactions a wide berth. It was the social equivalent of a celestial event no one knew how to process. He didn't try to breach it. Benji's mind, for all its brilliance, was a binary system. I was either a resource, a compliant, understanding satellite, or I was an anomaly to be quarantined until he had the processing power to deal with me. Clearly, I had been moved to the latter category. Sarah Welch, however, was a different story. I was in the library, deep in the recursive beauty of the Julia set, when a shadow fell across my screen. I assumed it was Leo, coming to make another cryptic comment about my noisy math. But the scent was wrong. It was a soft floral perfume, clean and expensive. I looked up. Sarah Welch stood there, her cello case leaning against her leg like a graceful, wooden companion. She had a face made for poetry, all pale skin and serious dark eyes, but right now, those eyes were narrowed with an unsettling intensity. "Ilara," she said. Her voice was lower than I expected, a cello's note given human form. "Sarah." I kept my tone neutral, a shield against whatever this was. She didn't smile. She slid into the chair opposite me, moving with a dancer's economy. She studied me for a moment, and I felt like one of Benji's specimens under a microscope. But her analysis felt different, more emotional, more dangerous. "He talks about you, you know," she said finally. "All the time. I didn't need to ask who. I'm sure he does." I was a useful dataset. A flicker of something, annoyance, crossed her features. "It's not like that. Not anymore. Now it's Ilara said this and Ilara would know that. And I wonder what Ilara's algorithm for this would be." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "He's obsessed." The word landed like a blow. It was the wrong word. A violent, possessive word. Benji wasn't obsessed. He was perplexed. I had become an unsolvable problem, and it was gnawing at the edges of his focus. He's not obsessed, I said, turning back to my screen. The fractal spiraled endlessly. He's just confused. I stopped making sense to him. It bothers his sense of order. You broke his brain, she stated, and there was no admiration in it. It was an accusation. I looked back at her. He broke it himself. I just stopped helping him glue the pieces back together. Her composure cracked just for a second. A hairline fracture of pure, teenage insecurity. Do you love him? The question hung in the air between us, stark and unadorned. It was the question I had built a universe around for years. And now, faced with it, the answer felt less like a confession and more like a historical fact. I did, I said, and the past tense felt true. Felt like turning a page. For a long time. But I don't think I was ever in love with him. Not the real him. I was in love with the magnificence of his mind. The way he saw the universe. It was like having a front row seat to the Big Bang. It's intoxicating for a girl who likes to know how things work. I gestured to the glowing screen. But you can't love a supernova. You can only admire it and try not to get burned. Sarah stared at me, her earlier anger seeming to drain away, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. She was realizing the competition she had won was for a prize I no longer wanted. That the ghost she was fighting was already at peace. He's not a supernova, she whispered, but it sounded weak. She was trying to convince herself. Isn't he? Asked gently. He's all energy and brilliance and chaos. He'll either illuminate you or consume you. Probably both. Closed my laptop. The question isn't whether I love him, Sarah. The question is, do you know what you're signing up for? She had no answer. She just sat there, pale and beautiful, her hand resting protectively on the neck of her cello case. She had come for a confrontation, a showdown with the other woman. She had found instead an astronomer who had retired her telescope. She stood up abruptly, the chair legs scraping against the floor. She looked lost, adrift in a sea of equations she couldn't solve. He's not that complicated, she said, but it was a lie and we both knew it. She left then, her footsteps silent on the carpet. I was left alone with the ghost of my own past love, not as a weeping wound, but as a fascinating fossil. A proof of a theorem I had finally, conclusively solved. The answer was no. The proof was in the quiet, steady rhythm of my own heart, finally beating for itself. The spring concert was the last event of the year. The air in the auditorium was thick with the scent of old wood, lemon polish, and the restless energy of a student body counting down the final hours. I sat alone near the back, a program folded on my lap. I wasn't there for Benji. I was there for the music. Sarah Welch took the stage, her cello held between her knees like a second self. The spotlight caught the sheen of her black dress. She looked ethereal and terribly serious. She nodded to the pianist, settled her bow, and began. It was Shostakovich. Cello Sonata in D minor. It was, as Benji had noted, dissonant. It was full of aching silences and furious, sawing cries. It was the sound of a heart being methodically taken apart. It was not beautiful in a simple way. It was true. I let the music wash over me, the complex, painful geometry of it. I didn't try to analyze it. I just felt it. And in that feeling I understood something final. After the thunderous applause, I slipped out before the house lights came up. The evening air was cool and sweet, a promise of the summer to come. I stood under a canopy of budding oak trees, breathing it in. Ilara! I knew the voice. Turn. Benji stood a few feet away. His hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked older. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, bewildered exhaustion. The supernova had collapsed in on itself. She was magnificent, I said. It was the truth. He nodded, his eyes on the ground. The precision was 98.7%. But the emotion defied quantification. He finally looked up at me, and his gaze was clear, unguarded. For the first time, he wasn't looking at me to extract data. He was just looking. I got it wrong. All of it. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I thought love was a formula, he continued, his voice low. A set of perfect, elegant conditions that, when met, would yield a predictable result. But it's not. It's Shostakovich. It's chaos and quiet and pain. And it's a choice. Not a calculation. He was finally learning the language. He was just years too late. I'm sorry, he said. The words were simple, unadorned. No metrics, no percentages. Just a raw human fact. I know, I said. And I meant it. The anger was gone. All that was left was a distant academic pity. It's okay, Benji. He seemed to shrink a little with my forgiveness, as if the weight of his regret was finally settling on his shoulders. What happens now? He asked. It was the most lost I had ever heard him. I don't know, I said honestly. You figure it out. One messy, unquantifiable day at a time. A group of students burst out of the auditorium doors, laughing, their voices cutting through the night. The spell was broken. Benji Sharpe was just a boy standing under a tree, and I was just a girl saying goodbye. Goodbye, Benji, I said. He opened his mouth, perhaps to offer one last equation, one final piece of data, but then he stopped. He just nodded. Goodbye, Ilara. I turned and walked away, towards the parking lot, towards the rest of my life. I didn't look back. There was no need. The equation was balanced. The proof was complete. Epilogue. 5 years later. The coffee shop was loud and warm, a haven from the drizzly gray of the city afternoon. I was marking up a paper on quantum topology, a red pen in one hand, a ceramic mug in the other. My work was noisy by Leo's definition, but it was my noise. It was a language I had built for myself. The bell above the door jingled. I glanced up out of habit. And there he was, Benji Sharpe. His hair was shorter, tamer. He wore a practical, waterproof jacket. He was holding the door open for a woman. Not Sarah Welch, someone else, someone with a kind smile and a patient expression. He was pointing to something outside, explaining the angle of the rain, the likely trajectory of the storm clouds, the efficiency of the shop's awning design. She listened, her smile never wavering, and touched his arm gently to guide him inside. He saw me then. His eyes met mine across the crowded room. For a second I saw the old calculation flicker, the rapid assessment of variables, the search for the correct algorithm for this unexpected social interaction. Then it stopped. He didn't approach. He didn't wave. He just offered a small, quiet smile. It wasn't the brilliant, blinding smile of the boy trying to fold the universe into a paper airplane. It was the softer, more weathered smile of a man who had learned that some things don't need to be folded. They just are. I returned the smile. A simple, human acknowledgement. He turned back to the woman and I turned back to my work. The red pen made a final, decisive checkmark in the margin. Quod erat demonstrandum. That which was to be demonstrated. It was over. It was finally beautifully over. And the silence it left behind wasn't empty. It was full of the sound of my own life being lived.